This is Your Other Brothers podcast.
Welcome, friends, to Your Other Brothers podcast, navigating faith, homosexuality, and masculinity together. I'm your host, Tom, and here with me, as always, as in the last one episode, it's my brother, Jacob. What's up, Jacob?
Hey, guys.
And joining us, this is so weird, joining us from afar is our other brother, Ryan. What's up, Ryan?
Hello from Raleigh, the city of Oaks. So far away.
Coming in from Raleigh, the city of Oaks, is Ryan. Yeah, it's kind of a little flip-flop this month. We're switching things up a little bit. And Jacob, we're together, and Ryan, you're far away. But the bonds are still there. We've switched our puzzle pieces around. But the overall image is still clear and bright and promising. And we're back, and we're talking about what else but intimacy all over again. Because once wasn't enough with us three. We were too intimate. Not enough intimate.
I think we need a third part where Jacob and I are in the same room together and you're Skyped in, Tom.
Yeah.
Tom.
I think that should be a thing. Can we make that happen? I'm not going to force it,
Please.
but if y'all feel led by the Spirit to do that could be great. You guys, thanks for coming back. Thanks for braving the intimate waters once again, because we are once again talking about intimacy because we have so much to say about it, and there's lots of stories and wisdom hopefully to be gleaned, and we're just gonna have a good old time getting intimate once again. Intimacy. I'm trying to figure out, like, intimacy part 2 doesn't sound right. I'm thinking, let me workshop the title with you guys, because by the time our listeners listen to it, it's already titled, it's already done. But what are y'all's thoughts on what to call this episode? Because if intimacy part 2 is off the table, what would you call it? What do you think?
Honestly, I don't have a great answer, but I think Ryan does. He just feels like a very intimate person that can think of titles for part 2s.
Wow, y'all! Because here, y'all want to hear what my brilliant idea was?
Absolutely.
Which is probably the one that people hear when they clicked onto their iTunes. They subscribed. They saw episode 48, and it's called "More Intimacy." What do you think?
Clever.
What do you think?
Very, very clever.
What do you think?
Very clever.
I like it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say
that's what we're talking about. We're talking about more intimacy.
For the fact that we are doing this in the same place, Tom, it does feel more intimate because I can look at you as we're talking, which
it's a whole other level of intimacy.
A whole new level.
And you see, this one is different because a little behind the scenes, like this is it. We're peeking behind the curtain for everyone that's always wondered. We've done 2-part episodes in the past, which were recorded in one setting. Like, it was a massive 3.5-4 hour conversation that just took place in one setting that there's no way we could turn that into one episode. So we split it up into 2 episodes. But that is not the case in this one. In this one, we talked for like 2.5 hours last time, and we may talk for 2.5 hours this time, but they're 2 separate recordings. It's kind of this like unexpected 2-part podcast that's happening. And so here we are. Intimacy, more intimacy. Because that's how it happened.
Meanwhile, here in Raleigh, I'm sitting here alone, and so for me, this is less intimacy.
Less intimacy.
For some of us, more intimacy. For some of us, less. And for some, like myself, just the right amount each time.
The same amount.
The same amount of brother times. In any case, whether you're experiencing more intimacy or less intimacy since our last podcast, whether you're on this show or listening to the show, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we're talking about it again. I think there's, like I said, lots more to say.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so it's time, y'all, then. Let's waste no time. The Brother Beat with Jacob and Ryan and Tom. This is our exciting intro segment where we just kind of start to get to know each other. We're trying to stir some conversation, and it's a great opportunity also to throw in some extra bonus content for all of our faithful yobbers and yobbies supporting Your Other Brothers on Patreon. And we do this bonus podcast called the Yobbalog every single month. And I always say the brother beat that isn't as good, isn't as dynamic, isn't as fresh, doesn't really fit in as much, that gets relegated to the YOBblog. And Jacob, just because I relegated your brother beat to the YOBblog last time, doesn't mean that this time, like, you don't have a strike against you. Like, we've all been relegated. Ryan's been relegated a couple times. I've been relegated. I myself have been relegated. So like everyone goes to the YOBblog at some point. But in many ways, the YOBblog gives your brother beat the freedom to be whatever it wants to be. It can survive on its own.
That's a really interesting mixed bag of criticism and compliment. Like, your beat isn't good enough to be with everyone else's, but it can be whatever it wants to be over in the wasteland of the
YOBblog. Subscribe now to the YOBblog.
Whenever my brother beat winds up in the YOBblog, I prefer to call it more bonus than the others.
More bonus than the others. Yeah. So just like we've done the last few episodes, we'll have 2 brother beats on this particular podcast, and we'll save one for the YOBblog for extra bonus goodness over there every single month. So let's dive in and start talking about stuff. Ryan, let's go to you.
Yes.
This is straight to the deep end. I've been reminded. I'm periodically reminded of this truth about me that sometimes it's easy to forget, but sometimes like reaches out and slaps me in the face, which is that I have almost zero desire to ever be a dad. Like, I love kids. I work with kids at church, but I have like zero desire to be a dad, and like that kind of like drive to reproduce and have kids is completely foreign and alien to me. Like, I don't understand what's going through my friends' heads when they decide to make their own children instead of like adopting, for example. Like, I can recognize, okay, it's good, it's refining to raise children, and God teaches you a lot. But you can do that with adoption, right? Like, I don't know. So that's this whole big thing. But I was curious to ask you guys, like, which side of the fence do you fall on? Like, would you relate to that kind of fatherhood drive, or is that also sort of foreign waters to you?
Well, I can answer that first. Question. I think I actually connect a lot with what you said, Ryan, of like, I've really never felt called to fatherhood in that sense. And it's not been something that's been a passion or a desire, which I've always taken as actually a positive thing, because in this calling of probably lifelong singleness, it would be really challenging if that dream of having children of my own was something I was really wanting. But because of that not being the case, it kind of feels almost like a blessing of, with all the other things that I feel like I might have to sacrifice on this journey, that isn't one of them. And that I think I'm actually thankful for in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I've had an interesting journey with fatherhood, the notion of fatherhood, because for years, like years and years and years, I really did want to be a dad. And don't mistake that for saying that I don't want to be anymore. But I will say that, yeah, for years and years and years, the idea of being a dad was way more appealing than the idea of ever having a spouse, ever having a partner, ever having someone annoyingly there all the time. Like that just couldn't get behind that. But the idea of having a kid to care for, especially the more I've done like tutoring, I've worked in all kinds of youth environments, tutoring and working at camps and various schools and learning centers and youth programs. There is something inside of me that like really treasures the aspect of being a dad. And that a lot of that I think just goes back to feeling like my own childhood was broken and not what it could have been, that there was something missing. And the idea that I could like, I don't know, like kind of have a firsthand perspective on what a kid needs in this world, and to like know from my childhood what was lacking and what I needed, that I could bestow that on whoever my son or even my daughter could be. Whenever I think about fatherhood, I always, for some reason, I never pictured daughters. I was like, I would only ever have a son because I know how to deal with boys, but not girls. So there's that. But then I would say in recent years, I've kind of softened on that a little bit, or hardened. I went one way or the other. I went the opposite direction in the sense that I just realized that this world is incredibly broken and it's only getting like more broken in so many ways, just like more access to pornography and technology is getting crazy and kids are like, I don't know, it just feels like younger and younger kids are getting screwed up and messed up. And it's just because the way the world is going and the culture is going. And the idea of bringing a kid into this world is really now not appealing. Certainly by procreation, but even, I don't know, I guess maybe adoption would be that exception because the baby already exists in adoption or the child already exists in adoption versus like creating a new one from scratch. That's not appealing really. But, so I don't know. I still kind of have this like tender spot in me that is like, and people have told me over the years, like, Tom, you would be such a good dad. And that's so, if nothing else, that's so affirming to hear when people tell me that. But whether or not I actually enact that, like I always say, let me start with a dog first and let me see if I can take care of a dog. And then if that goes well, then maybe I can think about adoption from there. But if I can't even commit to taking care of a dog, then I'm nowhere close to being able to take care of a kid.
I don't think I've ever actually been told that I would make a good dad, which is now concerning me. I had never thought about that.
You would make a good dad.
I don't think anyone's ever...
Jacob, you would be a great dad.
So,
good. Look at that
I've
beard.
always felt,
That's such a dadly beard.
Aww.
Dadly beard.
You,
and you're balding, so that'll be good for you in the future.
Right. Absolutely. I I find that I'm really awkward with children. I think I thrive from age 0 to 2.5. Like I love babies.
See, that is my worst.
Great there. But then from 3 to 20, I'm just an awkward mess. I don't know what to say, how to be myself. Just
See, I'm having this problem.
Naturally.
I'm an uncle and uncle for the
Same.
first time. Well, yeah, you're an
terrifying.
Uncle too. Well, yeah. So my little niece she just turned 1 in the fall, so she's a little over 1 year old. And my brother, who's been on this show multiple times, is such a goofy, extroverted, outgoing person. And my niece loves him. She'll see his face and he makes like the weirdest, goofiest faces. And she just falls in love and Googles and grabs his beard and hair and loves him. She'll look at me and like her entire face will literally change and she'll just stare at me. Like literally she'll just stare at me. Like, who is this person? Wait, get back the funny one. Why do I have to look at this one? And so then we have all these awkward pictures together of just like, we're just looking at each other. And I try to be excited and force it, but it just doesn't translate and I can't. And so I'm really holding out that this, like, eventually I'm going to win out. Like my brother's winning right now because he's got the goofy thing going for him and she's just totally sensory right now. But yeah, give it a few years and she becomes moody and she needs like someone to talk to or someone. I think that's when Uncle Tom is really going to shine.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, just wait till she's like an angsty teenager.
I know. I'm really I'm biding my time. Yeah. So Andy, your time is numbered and I will have my day. I will be the cool uncle soon. I know I'm not now, but I'm waiting. Methodically waiting. Yeah. That was good, Ryan. That was a good question.
Absolutely.
That's a strong contender to make it into the episode. Let's see what Jacob has to offer.
A lot of pressure. Okay, so we dove into the deep end. Now we're gonna doggy paddle over to the really shallow end of the pool. But sticking with the theme of intimacy and intimates, I like to talk a little bit about underwear.
I'm glad you're bringing this up.
What could be more intimate than our undergarments? And I know that last episode we refused to let lingerie be
big lingerie. We'll have no say.
We won't have any of that. But I'm gonna bring in just a taste of that. So
is there a word for male lingerie? Is that a thing?
Not that I know of, but who knows?
Okay.
So anyway, underwear for me, for most of my life, has really never been something that I gave much thought to. Like, I'm pretty sure that I wore Hanes until I was probably 18. And a lot of my underwear, I think like most boys, was bought by their mom. And so you just wear what you have and it's not a big deal. And it hasn't been until recent years that I've actually put in a little bit more thought and a little bit more care into what I wear in terms of underwear.
What you underwear.
What I underwear. And I have found a desire for both comfortable but also good looking underwear and having like bringing in more interesting colors and patterns. I don't really know why though I desire to be more interesting because 97% of my time, my underwear is seen only by me. And so I'm curious to hear y'all's journey with underwear and what that's looked like.
This is good. This is I don't know how you feel about talking about underwear, Ryan. And I don't necessarily feel excited to talk about it right now, but I see the value in it because I've been on an underwear journey myself the last couple of years. What about you, Ryan? Have you been on any kind of underwear journey?
Oh yeah, I think that's yeah.
Tell us your underwear journey.
I can relate to what you said, Jacob, of like, I grew up in Hanes or Fruit of the Loom, whitey tighties. So I wore that all through middle school. In high school, I started to branch out to boxers and boxer briefs, mostly boxers, and eventually I settled on boxer briefs. And I did find that buying good underwear made a difference in my day-to-day life in that it was more comfortable and just made me happier. But also it felt nice to like treat myself to that and like say, okay, yeah, my body is worth spending a little bit of money on underwear, even though I'm the only one who's going to appreciate it, and that's fine. That's enough. That's enough of a reason. And I have not. I've only recently started buying underwear with patterns, but I don't know. It's kind of nice. It's like it adds like a little bit of energy that only you know about.
Yeah, energy that only you know about. That's a great descriptor.
My very favorite brand is Pair of Thieves, and they have it at Target.
Oh my gosh!
Are we?
Yes,
wait,
they
are we
do.
agreed on this?
Why are we?
Yes,
why
they
are we
do.
all on the same page? We're all pairing of thieves. That is amazing.
Yeah, it's like, and there's like one type, the type that's like the kind of, almost, I forget what they call it, but the kind of meshy type. That's like the good one. The other one isn't. Don't spend your money.
Sure.
So we were literally at Target like 3 hours ago, perusing the Pair of Thieves underwear section and just touching. It's kind of so awkward actually, touching all these exposed pieces of underwear, just hanging there and just feeling them.
It was also kind of awkward that there's
a woman there stacking
there
things.
was a
Yeah.
female employee very close to us. Who I think we were kind of in her way even as we were looking at the underwear and just
we were
talking about
rude,
it
actually.
and touching it and yeah, that was.
If I'm shopping for underwear, I require complete solitude.
I need everyone. It's like entering in one of those lavatories on the airplane and you slide the lock, it turns green to red. It's like everyone stay away from the bubble for the next 30 seconds.
I'm pretty confident this is the first time I've ever looked at underwear with another human being.
Wow.
So that's a pretty intimate thing.
That was intimate. Yeah, I am astounded right now that we are all on the same page with Pair of Thieves. Big shout out. Hey, if Pair of Thieves,
want to sponsor
honestly,
this.
If Pair of Thieves would sponsor this podcast, that would be amazing.
It would be such a good sponsor for.
I really
your
would.
other
I might send an email to the Pair of Thieves department because then if they gave us a code to like give to our listeners, that would be so cool.
That would be cool.
I'm gonna pray about it, y'all. Pray about this with me, okay? Yeah. So my underwear journey started out in tighty whitey land, and it was the worst. I felt, especially like growing up in my household, talking about like intimate things was just so off the table. And underwear is so intimate. And so meanwhile, I'm like forced to wear tighty whities while clearly I go to the locker room, everyone's changing. Like I grew up in a boxers culture, like all the other boys are wearing boxers. And I just feel that's just like such a simple, stupid, but also really profound way that I just felt different. Cause I just go to the locker room and I look around and I'm like, why do they get to wear all that? And I'm wearing this. And so when I grew up, when I started to purchase my own underwear, I made the switch from like tighty whities to boxer shorts and did it just because I was like, yeah, now I'm equal. But like they were so uncomfortable. And it was obviously the brand that I was buying. Like it was probably just standard Hanes, Fruit of the Loom, whatever. Like one of those 5-packs with like the little slash through the 5 that's actually 6. You get 6. It's actually that many.
Whoa.
But they're just like so uncomfortable and they ride and they're just not, and they're like hard. Like it's like, why do people stuff their bodies into these? It is so ridiculous. And it's only been like in the last, okay. So then I'm sorry. So then there's many chapters to my underwear journey. So bear with me, y'all. So then after taking the hard turn to boxer shorts land, then I realized, okay, like I hear about these boxer briefs, which I guess is like some kind of middle ground. And so I'll try those out. And so then I tried that out for a while, and that was good. That was fine. You know, I was comfortable. I was no longer like forcing myself into something that was awkward and uncomfortable. But it was the same thing. You know, you go to Walmart and you buy the pack with the 4, with the slash, with the 5, and you buy these like 5 packs of things that'll last you like 3 months before they get disgusting and holy, not good holy, but bad holy. Yeah. And they were always like safe colors, you know, they're always black, gray, or like the light blue color. And it was just very safe and boring. And then I don't know what inspired it, but all of a sudden, like I just start branching out, and I'm just like, you know what? Life is more. We deserve more than this.
Preach.
5-pack of awful underwear that is going to be ruined in a few months. Like, this is ridiculous. I cannot live like this anymore. And then I just started trying like new underwear companies. I would listen to podcasts, and that's probably where I started learning about it. Like some podcasts would be sponsored by different underwear companies. And so I went through this MeUndies phase. I'm coming out of it now. I'm coming out of this MeUndies phase, because I heard a lot about MeUndies. It's like 5 times softer than cotton. It's like, whoa, how can it be softer than cotton, let alone 5 times? And they're pretty soft, I gotta say. They're pretty soft. But
they're like, sorry to interrupt. Aren't they hand wash only?
No.
Oh.
They're not hand wash only. No. But the problem with the MeUndies, like really soft material, but also kind of righty and not as firm, I guess, as I would like them to be.
And also expensive. They're like $20 each.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they're expensive, but
Wow.
like I've never let the price deter me, because I'm like, honestly, if there's one part of my body that deserves to be comfortable, it's that. So if it means paying $20 a pair, then I will, by gosh, pay $20 a pair. And I've only now recently, in the last maybe 6 months, 8 months, made this realization at Pair of Thieves. And it came on a lark when I saw a Pair of Thieves pair of boxer shorts on clearance at Target. And I was like, I'm just gonna, it's like $2
Forever changed.
and try it out. And it was the most comfortable, like, yeah, honestly, I guess the most comfortable pair I'd ever worn. And
They go on
that's
clearance?
Yeah.
Sometimes
I need to look in the clearance rack more often.
go to the clearance aisle. But here's the thing. So I tried that out. Loved the pair. Checked out their website, because their website has way more variety options than if you go to the Target section. Even today when we're at the Target section, they don't have the kind that I like. I haven't tried the mesh kind that you've described, Ryan, but I'm intrigued to try it. But yeah, what I found on their website, I mean, anyone can go. It's kind of awkward. You can go to this website and see the kind of underwear that I'm wearing, but you can go to the Pair of Thieves website, and what I like is the slim fit boxer shorts. So they're not boxer briefs. I've made the switch back to boxer shorts, but they're like slim fit. They're not like baggy, because they have a longer boxer short, and then they have the slim fit, which is kind of trimmer. And I'm a trim guy, and I was like, I think that was my problem with boxer shorts, was just the dimensions. It just felt too big, and then obviously tighty whities was too small, and so I was just like, the boxer briefs is a nice medium. But I found that this slim fit boxer really just works for me. And that is now where I've at. And I feel like it's been literally a 32-year journey getting to this point. But I feel like I've finally arrived after trying it, because I didn't even leave. I've condensed this story a lot. I've tried 7 other underwear companies in the meantime, but this is the one. I feel like I've arrived. Like, I feel good about wearing those. And they have like, and getting back to like the look, like, yeah, nobody's seeing them per se, but there's a confidence there that I appreciate, and that translates. It's why I've really changed my entire wardrobe from the inside out the last few years, because I used to just wear blacks and grays and whites, both underneath my outer clothing and my outer clothing itself. And now I've been very intentional about colorizing my wardrobe, both what you see and what you don't see. And it kind of goes a long way, actually, to instilling kind of some kind of a confidence, an extra boost in my steps. I feel a little more seen. I feel a little more adventurous. I feel a little more, I don't know, confident is the word I would use. And I need all the confidence I can get. So that was probably talking way too long about
that was
underwear.
That was an excellent journey. That went, see, here I thought that we were going to be playing in the shallow end, but we
Yeah, you said we doggy
out.
padded back to the shallow, but that was actually pretty deep.
Definitely. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
I'll share an extra like funny story about underwear from this would be like 9th grade. being like 14, I was very concerned about spontaneous erections. And
That is a great band name, by the way. I'm going to jot that down.
And so I wore whitey tighties most of the time because I believe that would help with that kind of situation. Like, a little more control, maybe a little more like a little less obvious if it happens when it happens. But everyone else apparently wore boxers. And so for like the month and a half or something that I had to change clothes for gym class, I like got a few pairs of boxers just to wear during those months so I could fit in the locker room because I didn't want to be like the one.
That's so cute.
One kid with the tidy whities.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, I hated being that kid. That was the worst. I would intentionally like get to PE as late as I could to give myself like the least amount of eyeballs on me changing. Like I would always think about stuff like that. Like, oh my gosh, everyone's going to notice that I'm still wearing like second grader underwear.
Yeah. I've just never been able to wear boxers. I believe I've owned a couple pairs.
Have you?
in
Have
my
you
whole
dabbled?
life.
Yeah,
I have,
just
but it
couldn't
feels
get
too
there.
much like you're not wearing underwear, which I don't
I'm telling
enjoy.
you, the slim fit. Try out the
fit.
slim
Yeah,
fit.
that is-
So I'm trying out. Yeah, so I'm sold, completely sold on the slim fit boxer. That is to death do I part. That is my ride or die.
Wow.
But I also I would like some variety with when I'm athletic. So when I'm doing CrossFit and when I'm running, like I wouldn't wear that during that. I would want some kind of more support. So I'm trying out the mesh and I'm going to see how that goes just for like the moisture wick, whatever material whatever they call it, So I'm going to try to find, a good balance between my athletic underwear and then just my casual rest of my life underwear. So I feel good about at least knocking out like 75% of my undergarments now. I feel good about that decision. And Pair of Thieves, big shout out to Pair of Thieves, our feature sponsor of the show. They make fantastic socks and undershirts. Like Jacob, you are now sporting a Pair of Thieves undershirt, brand new.
I'm actually wearing one as this is being recorded.
Tell them how our future sponsor. Tell them how it feels. How does it feel?
It
Keeping in
does-
mind, it's our future sponsor.
Sure, yes, absolutely. It feels good, definitely. It's got a nice fit, soft fabric. It's wicking
like-
away all of the moisture.
Yeah.
It's
It is really soft, y'all.
breathable. I will say though, as a future sponsor, that they are a little pricey.
Okay, yeah.
So
yeah.
for
but you're
two
getting your
shirts, it
bang
was
for your buck.
maybe somewhere like $23, which seems like quite a bit for shirts that I'm wearing,
But
only underneath other shirts.
Keep in mind, though, listeners will have a future offer code that they
Yes.
can use for like 40% off or
10%
something.
free.
No, I'm thinking 40%.
40%,
Yeah, we're
they're not
gonna
gonna
really
offer that,
go
Tom.
off. Yeah.
So
We're
sorry.
gonna. And so I've started using their socks. You were complimenting my socks earlier and how like
They are
fancy and
nice
colorful
socks.
they are. Yeah,
Yep.
I'm taking this whole thing like I told Jacob earlier, the socks piece is the last piece of my wardrobe that needs to come together because I honestly think I've done a fantastic job revolutionizing my shirts and my pants and my underwear, and now it's just my socks because I used to just wear boring white athletic socks the whole time, like 30 years of my life, and now I'm making the switch to funner, more adventurous, comfortable socks. And I will be complete. I will have arrived as a man when this happens. So stay tuned. All right, brothers. Well, that was the brother beat.
Well done.
There should be a jingle. If Dean were here, he sang it when he was on the show, but alas. Big shout out to Dean. Those are Brother Beats. If you want to hear what we didn't talk about, subscribe to the Yobblog. That's the way to go, really. Just subscribe to the Yobblog. Become a Yobber, and everything is going to be better in your life. That's the moral of the story. Thanks. Big shout out to our faithful Yobbers and Yobbies. And big shout out to all of our iTunes raters and reviewers. Our master raters. Right, Ryan?
Yeah.
Master raters. Once again, back-to-back months. Don't have any new ratings or reviews to share with you. I feel like it almost feels like we've reached our pinnacle. Like this is it. No one else is
Peaked.
listening. No one else is new. No one knew. Like we got everybody. The whole world is listening.
And we don't even have 100 reviews.
I know, we're so close. We're up to 91 as of this recording. So I don't know if there is 9 other people in this world who happen to listen. You could be a part of history and helping us get to triple-digit reviews. Not many podcasts get there. So we would love to get there with your help. And thanks to everyone who has rated and reviewed. It really has been so meaningful to read and listen to how this show, this work, and these conversations have just impacted people all over the world. It's like really been awesome. So thanks to all of you guys for taking the time to do that. It means a lot. And a big shout out to our current sponsor. So I know we want Pair of Thieves as a future sponsor. And honestly, more than any other brand or company, that is literally one that I would be thrilled to have supporting Your Other Brothers podcast. But until that day, we had a great podcast last time and a great sponsor last time with Woodworking Glue. And in the aftermath of that episode, it was really it's really affirming when, we have an authentic, deep conversation and things randomly come up in the episode. And then we get approached by a sponsor who loves what we're doing because of our conversation, what we did. And so thanks to Woodworking Glue for starting this conversation on intimacy. And thanks to our sponsor for this episode, Birdhouses, for sponsoring this episode. Birdhouses, providing intimate homes for creatures of the air for millennia. Millennia. Yeah, absolutely. Millennia. You can go back to the Stone Ages or the Jurassic Age, yes, or the Renaissance, and you can find these little intimate homes for these little birdies, little sparrows.
I'm really, really impressed by our sponsor too, because they do also provide houses for single celibate birds.
Ooh.
Yes.
That's really important.
That is really important.
So, the single celibate birds in our midst, they have a home, and we are so grateful for Birdhouses. Thank you for sponsoring this continuing conversation on intimacy. Again.
More intimacy.
More intimacy. It's a poetic title as we dive deeper into these waters. I've already gotten some really great feedback from some folks about our intimacy conversation. So it's great to be able to regather with you guys and to talk even more about intimacy.
Oh, I just thought of the sequel title.
Okay, better late than never. Yes. Breaking news. What is the title, Ryan, of this podcast?
Two podcasts, two intimacy, like Too Fast, Too Furious.
Thank you. That is what we need. We will affectionately regard this podcast as two podcasts, two intimacy. And you're envisioning that with the number 2?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Two podcasts, two intimacy. There we go.
It rolls
so
right
let
off
it
the
be.
tongue.
It really rolls, yeah. I can't wait to make the title card for this episode.
So we got a comment on the last podcast from Andre in Australia. He says, I've also wondered about all the things in the Old Testament and this life now that are a shadow of the things to come. So the Passover lamb was the shadow of Jesus as the lamb who was slaughtered for our sins. The Old Testament temple was a shadow of the intimacy of God dwelling his spirit in our bodies. Also, the prophets, kings were all shadows of Jesus. We also know that marriage is a shadow of the heavenly reality of being in relationship with God, where we are the bride and God is the groom. My question is, in what way are lovemaking and genitals shadows of some heavenly intimacy? I don't think the Bible answers this, but a curious question.
We have such smart listeners.
Yeah.
That is such a smart, intuitive question, talking about the shadows, the poetry of scripture from Old Testament to New, and seeing how those connect. And it's so fascinating to think about how where we are now in this quote unquote New Testament world, what foreshadowings are happening now that are going to be fulfilled in the next chapter. That's so fun to think about. I don't know what the answer is. What is the answer? Do you have any insights, y'all?
It's a really good question. The first thing that I thought about was in the book of John, where Jesus is praying for all of the believers, and he talks about this desire for unity and that we would all become one just as he and the Father are one. And that's something that language of oneness and unity is very common when talking about sex in a biblical way. And so to me, it feels like it's a picture that I think points to the kind of unity and oneness and vulnerability that will be a perfect reality in the new heavens and the new earth, both with one another and then also our connection to Jesus finally having the perfect unity as he shares with the other persons of the Trinity.
Yeah. So in addition to what you said, Jacob, I think that's a really good image of where kind of sexual intimacy, what that points us to in kind of our trajectory that we have collectively into eternity. But then thinking about genitals and intimacy in the Bible, I, for some reason, thought what popped into my head was circumcision, and I was imagining in biblical times, what's this interaction like? If you decide to follow the God of Israel as an adult man and deciding to become circumcised, which was a thing that happened. What's that like? Do you meet the priest the day of, or is it somebody you have this existing relationship with and you're like, okay, yeah, so just sit here and then there's snip. There's a lot of trust there, there's a lot of trust and there's pain.
Talk about intimacy.
Yeah. And there's blood and that kind of led me to think of this passage in Colossians 2:9, for in him the whole fullness of deity dwells bodily, and you have been filled in him who is the head of all rule and authority. In him also you are circumcised with a circumcision made without hands, by putting off the body of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ, having been buried with him in baptism, in which you are also raised with him through faith in the powerful working of God who raised him from the dead. So in some translations say, they translate this phrase by the circumcision of Christ. They translate it as circumcision by Christ's hands. And the image is that Christ is the one circumcising you. And I don't know, I guess I've thought that's kind of this beautiful image of intimacy, but also the way Christ is kind of the surgeon to do the hard, painful, but intimate work in your heart of cutting away the old flesh that you can't do on your own, and that you do trust him in his hands and kind of present your most private, darkest parts to him to handle and deal with and to come close to. So I thought, yeah, and it's such an interesting picture because it's not sexual at all. There is conceivably some kind of affection there, but it's this is not, you're not going into the situation with a sexual thought.
Sure.
Right. That's good. Those are good thoughts, y'all. And I've also thought about just when it comes down to commands, divine commands, you look in Genesis and the command given is to Adam and Eve is to be fruitful and multiply. And so that implies procreation on a really basic biological level. And you go to the New Testament and what are some of Jesus's last words are go and make more disciples and essentially be fruitful and multiply, not in a procreative sense, but in a more metaphorical and a spiritual sense, go and make disciples and increase. And so when I think about what the next chapter of that could be as far as lovemaking or reproduction, I don't know, it's when we get to the next phase, the next chapter, and it's all disciples of Jesus in one place, we're going to be multiplying praises and adoration and worship in an eternal and infinite setting. And that's what we're going to be creating essentially nonstop. And that's what I think of when I think about just what are we creating in paradise? What are we constantly making? And we're making praise and it never ends. And I'd like to think there's that relational aspect too. I'll still get to, while the praise is happening, I get to reconnect with Jacob, or I get to see Ryan again, or I get to see my friend from 6th grade that's not my friend anymore. And we get to catch up and just connect and worship and connect together. Like I'd like to think there's that relational aspect as well, that essentially we'll have the rest of time to get to know not only the brothers and sisters from our lives, but then just like all from untold, decades, centuries, and millennia of all these people who have followed this road together. Like that's such a cool concept to me. Like there's going to be all this. I'd like to think, I don't know, it's pure theorizing, but I'd like to think that we'll be able to do that.
I like that.
If that's inaccurate with your theology, I'm sorry, but that's just what I choose to believe. Really good question. Yeah, we got some good comments on this episode of the podcast. And then we also got this like exclusive message from a straight man. Here, exclusive straight man listener. We got this comment because we referenced in the last episode, like what do straight men think of as intimate, as far as like outside of women, like intimate feelings and experiences with women, like what is that? And so Jacob, maybe you can speak to this perspective a little bit. Sure. You have a connection.
I do have a connection. This exclusive straight man that has listened to our podcast happens to be my brother. And so he was able to give a little bit of feedback from that episode and talked about how for all of his life that in general, intimacy with other guys has always been more important than intimacy with women, except for when romance and that kind of attraction comes into play, then that seems to be the one that does supersede the others. But other than that, having those connections with other guys has always been top priority for him.
And for him as like a married person, like he's limited in just the practical way. Like there's one woman that he experiences that level of intimacy with versus a whole host of male friends that he can connect with and interact with day to day, week to week. That was really interesting to just like get that perspective from him. That I don't know that I would have expected that response, I guess. I just assumed that straight men just always are infatuated with women and hanging out with men or having that, even using that term intimacy, like that would just not, it would be off-putting or it wouldn't be accurate maybe. I don't know. Like it was interesting to get his response about that. Yeah. So big shout out to Jacob's brother.
Indeed. Yeah. Also just want to say that I happen to have one of the best brothers on the planet. So shout out to him because he's pretty great.
And my brother could totally beat up your brother.
Yeah. Yeah.
My brother's been on this show. No, we need to get your brother
on.
This is a big invitation to Jacob's brother. Come on the YOBcast. Be straight with us. Shooting straight.
Yeah, I was going to say, we'll name this segment Shooting Straight with Jacob's brother.
We should.
Are we intentionally not using his name?
I don't think he minds. I just
big shout out to Xavier.
I just haven't asked him, so I was walking with caution.
Yeah, no, shooting straight. We should have like a big red button that we can push at any time and bring in the straight voice for just the segment. I think that would be fantastic.
Love that.
So y'all, let's dive deeper. As we've like continued to just reference the last episode, I still want to move forward and talk more about intimate stories. What were y'all's thoughts after the last podcast? Did you feel good about it? Did you feel I don't know. Did you feel it was too vulnerable at times? I know for me, I'll just say my perspective. I went into it with that trepidation of not knowing where this podcast was going and what stories would come up and what memories it would trigger, because I've had this really hard journey with intimacy and figuring it out with different friendships and learning boundaries and having these memories like haunting me from friendships that used to be intimate and no longer are. And I remember there was a stretch of it that was difficult, that felt like it was starting to unearth some things. And so it was simultaneously good to like start to talk about it and face it and not be afraid of it. And I have this this dual reaction now to go even deeper as I'm thinking about other stories from my life that I feel like I want to share, but also feel really difficult to. So part of me doesn't want to, but part of me feels this like compulsion that I need to. And I'd like to think by the end of this hour together that I will have shared them and we'll be all the better for it. But I was curious as y'all were processing it, do y'all just have any negative stories Do you have any stories that you're like just like nope, not sharing that one, or have you thought about sharing for this podcast, or like I don't know, just I want to gauge the comfort level of maybe the lesser popular intimate stories from your lives.
So like stories where intimacy went wrong, or stories where like
Well, either way, like either maybe inappropriate lines were crossed where it went from something intimate and special to just like not good, not healthy, or stories that I'm going to share, which include just relationships that used to be intimate that no longer are, and how that does that affect your view of intimacy moving forward, as it does me, or am I just the only freak or the only person that's just like scarred or has trouble with intimacy?
I don't know. I definitely have those relationships that were intimate at one point, but aren't anymore, just because like we've each kind of moved on for whatever reason. And I guess that's led me to see intimacy as something that comes and goes in a relationship. And the relationships that I still have that are intimate over, probably my longest running relationship that I'd consider intimate, it's probably about 12 years by now.
Wow.
Like I can point to that one and say, hey, look, sometimes people do stick around. Like sometimes the relationship does survive over that period of time. But what is more typical is just that people have different stages of life, and to be fair, part of some of those things have been caused by, me, I guess. Like that's,
No, Ryan.
I mean, I don't want to
you.
say that because it sounds, just saying that is unfair to me, but I'll claim it first that like some of the unhealthy patterns were mine, and the other person, it's usually fair to say didn't respond very well or didn't handle it very well. And so it's not just that many relationships, many friendships just have this natural life cycle that doesn't last forever, but also that my own brokenness has kind of caused that to come to a close. I'm thinking one thing that comes to mind is my friendship with a fellow named John, who I blogged about last year sometime. And I think that was a relationship where I felt that I had opened up a lot to him, and he had sort of opened up to me, but his personality and his ideals of friendship were so different that it was kind of unbalanced, where I was offering way more in intimacy than I think he was. And I think that unbalance was one of the things that really started to cause that relationship to fall apart.
Yeah. So how does that affect your psyche, Ryan? I'm trying to get into where y'all are coming from to compare it to me, to make myself feel worse and different, because that's what I do.
Oh, this is fun and cool.
Yeah, this is like you mentioned this just like this part of life, like it comes and it goes, moments of intimacy with people, and sometimes it's your fault and sometimes it's the other person's fault. Like, does that affect your relationships ever, like today and moving forward? Do you ever like think about that, like, oh, like I experience intimacy with this person now, and I may not in 5 years, or is that something that only I do? Because I feel like that's something that now more than ever, that is what I do. Like I am constantly aware of when I experience special, sacred, intimate moments with people, and I feel like the only thing I can think about sometimes is like, wow, this is gonna end at some point, because we live in a fallen world and relationships are so hard to maintain and continue and deepen and grow. And I don't know, I feel this despondency that I've never felt, or not that I've never felt, but I feel it more strongly now than I ever have.
I feel that way towards individuals. Like, so someone who I have had that kind of relationship with, and then we sort of move on and aren't like that anymore. Like, I have a really hard time imagining myself getting that close to them again. especially if there's some sort of heartbreak at the end of it. So yeah, I relate to that with like with regards to specific individuals, but I think my leaning into intimacy with people is driven much more, but by just, I desperately want it, and less, I feel like that desire to have that intimacy isn't really easily restrained by bad experiences in my history. And so, yeah, not that those experiences don't weigh on me, but I think that for me, it's never been enough to stop me from eventually kind of pursuing intimacy with different people again.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that. Of while I have had friendships where intimacy was experienced, and then things have happened, whether it be because of me or because of them or whatnot, to where that closeness is no longer possible. It hasn't happened often enough to where at this point I don't find that I have a fear of pursuing it. And this could be in part just that experience, but also being the youngest one here too, of just having less time that I've been on this earth to go through some of those things. But something that I have learned and are learning as I grow is that I have such a passionate desire for intimacy, and in order for it to become something good and something healthy and something lasting, I have to understand the simple truth that not everyone's me. Like, people have fears of intimacy. They have different wounds in their past that make it harder to get close and have that. And me just trying to push for it harder or to force it to happen or to do that is just not a good approach. And so learning how to meet people more where they are and let intimacy grow in a natural way, as opposed to something that I desperately want and try to do whatever I can to make it happen. And that just doesn't lead to good results.
Yeah. Yeah. So one story that I've blogged about that I definitely wanted to bring up on this podcast, and it's kind of the context, one of the contexts, I have several relationships I can draw from as far as this like despondency that I feel. But one that like definitely sticks out was one of the first times that I kind of felt that intimacy and then the loss of intimacy. It was with a straight guy, like one of the more meaningful relationships. It felt like one of those giant step forwards in life where I could share my story with a straight man and not be rejected and be accepted. Back in the days before Yob existed, before I've written books, and while I was still very early into my journey of navigating sexuality and community and vulnerability and all those pieces, I got to share my story, and we walked around a park, and we did like 3 laps around a park as we're just walking side by side. And I'm telling this guy, this fellow believer about being attracted to men from as long as I can remember, and how not many people in my life knew about it. And it's just been this like thing that's followed me, and this shadow that's been in my heart for as long as I could remember, and just got to share like a really deep, raw conversation with him walking laps around this park. And I loved that, like, this is one of my top 5 relational moments. I don't know if y'all create top relational moments. I mentioned last time about having like a trophy case of like intimate moments, like sacred, like from the movie Inside Out, there's all those little glowy balls. Have you guys seen that? So like I have this little trophy case of the glowy balls of sacred intimate moments. And this is like in that elite part of it was walking laps around this park with a straight guy, telling him my story. And at various junctures around the park, we would just stop and he would hug me, and it would just be like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds long of just like him hugging me as we walk around the park. Like it happened at least 3 times, if not 4 or 5 even. I forget, but yeah, it's just like regular intervals where a part of the conversation got hard, and and he said it was okay, and he would hug me, and we would keep going and talk some more, and that culminated all with sitting on a bench together. We just found a corner of the park with a bench and sat down, and he asked if he could pray for me, and so then, I bow my head and close my eyes like a good little Christian boy, and he sets his hand on my shoulder. And he was a big proponent of prayer being like a two-way street of speaking and talking to God, but then also stopping and listening and just being silent. And so like he prayed some stuff, and then it was just quiet, and he just let it sit. And so we're just sitting there in the silence, him with his hand on my shoulder, and we're just sitting there listening, and I'm just like sitting there listening, and I feel this warmth, emanating into my shoulder that I've never felt before. And it was really special because what he said after, it's like words that I can never forget, is in the aftermath of that silence, which, probably lasted a solid 2 minutes, 3 minutes of just silence sitting there. And he just prayed that, like, he saw an image of Tom on a battlefield and wearing armor that's too big, and he's like struggling to put it on and struggling to stand up, but he's doing it. He's putting on the armor, and he's staggering forward, and he's got his sword wielded and his shield and his armor, and it's awkward and it's clunky and it's tough, but he's moving forward essentially in the battle, and he's not content to just lay down and not fight. And there's such a power in that vision, for whatever he gleaned from that moment of silence, of just like seeing this vision of me on a battlefield, of like learning how to do this, essentially learning how to fight, learning how to exist, learning how to progress. And we hugged again after the prayer, saying amen and walking away. Like that moment to me is so sacred. Like, it's, like I said, it's up there in the upper echelon of these sacred, vulnerable, and intimate moments with another human being. And it's just really killer to not be friends with this person anymore. That's just so confusing to me. Like, how could I have had such a meaningful moment that, I can never unlearn, unsee, get emotional about? Like, I'm getting emotional thinking about it. And it's hard, I guess, to think about the notion of, pursuing, I don't want to say pursuing intimacy with anyone, because that's not accurate, but I definitely have this, like, I feel a little gun shy about moments like that. Like if someone else wants to pray for me and put their hand on my shoulder and listen for God to speak, like, I don't know, there's this fear and this terror that this moment isn't going to last. Like, it's just going to turn into a little glowy ball that turns from yellow to blue. And it's just now a sad memory. It's still mostly, I don't know, it's still really empowering when I think about that. It's not just all doom and gloom, but there is like this tinge of sadness. There's like, I guess there's a blue streak or blue stain inside the circle. If you guys have seen Inside Out, this will make sense, I guess. But yeah, it's kind of like this like weirdly empowering, but also kind of sad moment of intimacy from my life, just because I'm not friends with this guy anymore, and that's hard to reconcile.
Thanks for sharing that, Tom.
Yeah. So I appreciate what you said, Ryan, because it kind of gives me this perspective that I really can't translate 1 or 2 or 5 or 12 like friendships that dissipated onto all of my friendships, because it's not fair to my current friends. Like you said, it could very well impact individual relationships, like those friendships that either dissipated completely or for whatever reason took significant steps backward from, like, that can make it difficult to re-engage with them. Like, that's fair and that's legitimate. But what I have to like monitor in my relationships and my journeys with intimacy with other friends, with other men, like I'm trying to, not let a few sour relationships dictate all the others, because that's not fair it's not fair to me. But it's also not fair to my friends, of which you guys, I would include in that list. Like, it's not fair to y'all if I, dump all of my relational failures and intimacy, all the mornings of intimacy with other people onto you guys, and don't like enjoy strolls through the underwear aisle or working out at a CrossFit gym with you. Like, like learning to enjoy those intimacies with you guys as separate from any relational or intimate failures from the past or like wounds from the past.
One thing stuck out to me from that story, and that is the intimacy we can find with other people in prayer. Like, I think praying together with my friends have been some of the most intimate, some of the sweetest moments that I've had with them and with God. And I think there's a really special kind of intimacy, a special power there of going to God in prayer together with someone.
And I think that when that's combined with physical touch, I believe is such a important piece to that. And there are lots of biblical examples of people laying on hands as they're praying for people, and just that contact does something in that moment of intimacy that's really meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, Jacob, you told the story on the last episode of, who was it, your roommate or someone from college?
Yeah, a friend
who
from
prayed with you. Yeah,
friend from college. Yeah,
yeah, that was a really great story to, like, that blessed me just to hear about, like, wow, like brothers in faith can like literally touch each other and can touch each other on a whole other level too. Obviously, it's really just, yeah, it's been awesome to be able to have those moments of intimacy with other believers. Like that's been a blessing time and again to be able to connect, because I think I made the comment on that story that it combines all these levels of intimacies, because you have the spiritual dynamic and then you have the physical dynamic, and it's like, at least for me, that was emotional for me when I had this person like speaking over me, speaking this vision and this empowering image over me. Like, it got me emotional, and I probably teared up as it was happening. So there's like all kinds of intimacies converging in those moments of prayer with other believers. I've experienced that, a few times now.
I think mostly after the last episode, I was left thinking about ways I want more intimacy in my life, like who those people would be and what kinds of intimacy that would be and how I would pursue that. And I don't know that it really came to any good conclusions, but I was wondering, like, just in terms of moving forward, like what are some ways we can pursue intimacy and build intimacy in our lives, or how maybe our community, like bigger picture, can be cultivating a culture of intimacy.
Go, Jacob, solve our culture's intimacy problems.
Wow, yeah, that's a really big question. I think that the first thing that comes to mind is that I think in order to do intimacy well, you have to have a balance of all these different kinds that we've been talking about. So we've brought up emotional and intellectual and spiritual and physical, and I have this picture in my mind. It's a metaphor that I've used at different times, is that all of these different kinds of intimacy are buckets that are all connected to this crazy pulley system. And as we fill these buckets, the entire system is only maintained in a healthy way when they're all being filled at the same time. That if you start pouring into one and don't have anything else to counterbalance out the others, it isn't going to hold up. And I think this is often, for me, a helpful way to look at physical intimacy and the different ways that can be experienced in good and helpful and not good and helpful ways. Of, if you pour everything into that in the pursuit of intimacy, it's going to become an incredibly destructive thing, because you don't have the other things to both balance it and to keep it safe. So I think that as like all of those components are really important to the overall system. And so I think as we think about pursuing it as a whole, thinking about those different areas that might be weaker, whether that be your emotional connection or your spiritual connection, of when those pieces are lacking, I think you miss out on the fullness of what true intimacy can bring to you. So I think as we approach this being aware of how those different buckets are being filled so that things are kept in balance, I think is really important.
That's a really great picture, because with the friend from the story I just told, I can point to so many examples of interacting with this friend over the ensuing months, from that moment of us praying together. Like, I became super, like, ridiculously codependent on this person, especially for his touch. Like, that was something that I just absolutely latched onto and just craved constantly. It was just like, please keep touching me, like keep hugging me and keep putting your hand on my shoulder and just keep like that reassurance. Because there was such a reassurance there that, looking back on it now, like, yeah, I was absolutely obsessed, like, with this person's touch, and without really much regard for all those other aspects of intimacy, of spiritual connection, like continuing to do things like pray together or read scripture together, or emotionally, like even just learning more about his life and his struggles and hopes and dreams, and connecting more on an emotional level with him, instead of it just kind of being this inward focused, like, how can this person restore all the broken, wounded parts of me? Like, obviously I give myself a lot of grace, because that was, my first, in many ways, like my first steps out with a straight man. Like, he was very instrumental in just kind of showing me some of how the world works and interacting with straight men, because I didn't really have much opportunity prior to that. And so I definitely can see how that balanced approach of intimacy, like, that can be a really beautiful thing when you have all of those gears and pulleys and buckets like working and filling.
What about, and I guess maybe now I'm thinking, maybe one of my problems is that I just don't, like, when I want more intimacy, I don't ever voice that with people. Like, what do you think about just telling people, I want more intimacy with you?
We need to be more intimate.
Yeah. Like, how, like, should I say that? Yeah. How should I say that?
Yeah, maybe not to use the word intimacy. I mean, maybe depending on how close you are with said person. I have no problem with the word intimacy. Mm-hmm. I know Jacob doesn't. I know you don't either, Ryan. But yeah, like, having maybe the right verbiage of, like, I wish we just prayed together more, or I wish we, like, once a week or once a month, we just, like, read a chapter of the Bible together, or did a devotional or something, or that can look like anything, like being more vocal. Like, if you are a physical touch person, about saying, hey, like, yeah, hugs, instead of just like pounding fists goodbye or shaking hands or slapping, whatever the bros do, like, hey, like, honestly, like, a 3-second hug would honestly go such a long way when we say goodbye after parting ways. Like, voicing that, if that's intimate for you, if that's meaningful for you. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with just, like, voicing little things like that. Like, if you notice a lack in emotional intimacy, about being vulnerable, having vulnerable conversations, or doing, I don't know, whatever's emotional for people, or any of those other categories, like, you could bring that up with friends in different contexts, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Like, having a specific ask, like, whether it's like the 3-second hug, or can we pray together more often, instead of kind of the abstract. Can we be more intimate, please? Because even if they're okay with the word intimacy, even if that doesn't freak them out, it's still like, well, okay, well, what does that mean?
Sure. Yeah, I think any conversation on that is actually probably going to sound a lot like things we've already talked about, as we've tried to figure out sort of what does it look like, to where people just have very different ideas in their minds, that if you just said, I want more intimacy with you, they might not be thinking the same thing of what you're thinking. And so being able to have those conversations to talk about what it means and what it can look like, I have found to be really helpful. I have been in the past, I have been sort of burned by the request for more intimacy that does just give me more fear of asking.
So you've asked for more intimacy?
Yeah. So one of the stories that comes to mind is that when I first moved to this area, and I had a roommate, and I didn't really know anyone else here, and so he was sort of in my mind like, we have to become best friends in the world, because I don't have anyone else, and like, if this doesn't work, then I'm just going to be alone and sad. And he is not a physical touch person at all, but I definitely am. And we were talking at one point about how we could better love one another and pursue a deeper friendship. And I brought up the idea of like, hey, like hugs are super meaningful to me. If that would be something that you would be willing to do and just hug me more often, that'd be great. And when he heard that, he was fine with it and agreed. But then moving forward, probably hugged me once a week. And in my mind, I was thinking like 4 times a day. And so I didn't actually say that to him, but I did bring it up again that like, hey, like, you know, when we had that conversation about more physical touch, like I would really love to have more of that. And he pretty much told me that I was asking for too much, and that wasn't a reasonable thing for me to be wanting. And so that was really hurtful. And obviously, like, you can't force people into intimacy. And so there is some fear, and there have been other times where it's just that when you like any kind of rejection, it can really hurt. And when it's something that is as vulnerable as intimacy, when the whole point is that you are letting down all of your walls to be close to someone, and that's when you're at your most exposed. And so asking for that and being turned away is really heartbreaking.
I will say also there's like a good way to decline that and a not so good way to decline that. And to say like, you know, the good way to decline it is, I can see that that's something you really need and I appreciate that, but that's just not a need I can fill. It sounds like what he said is like, that's not reasonable. Like you're crazy, or that's it's a very kind of shaming way to kind of reject, which of course hurts way, way more.
Sure. Yeah. Because there's absolutely a way, like if you're not able to, like if you're just legitimately not able to provide for somebody, like there's total validity in saying that. Like I have friends, I mentioned last time, like towards the end of our first intimacy podcast, we talked about just like the disconnect in spirituality sometimes, and how, you know, as believers, we all need spiritual intimacy. We all need spiritual connection with our brothers and sisters in Christ. And we need that to keep going. Like we need that. And if we're friends with unbelievers, non-believers, it's fine. Like, and we should have friendships with them. We should, you know, get out of our bubbles, our Christian bubbles, and interact and befriend the world. But then it's not reasonable to like ask them to pray with us or to like minister to us if they're not on the same trajectory that we're on, you know, like that's not fair to them. That's just one example of a spiritual intimacy that you can't force on somebody because they can't give it back. And that could be applied to physical and emotional and other forms of intimacy too. For whatever reason, if they're not able to, if they're not in a place where they can offer that, you know, we have to have that understanding, I guess, that what we need may not be able to come from that person, and that might kill us. That might just absolutely wreck us, that we just want that person to cuddle with us on a couch for an hour watching a movie, and they can't provide that for whatever reason. And we have to like, I don't know. I'm speaking to myself. I don't want to include y'all, but I'm saying for myself, I need to, I guess show people grace and just take a deep breath and realize that that's where it's good to have a good network of people that we can lean on and not be so dependent on any one person. Because I think that's where you start to find issues and trouble. If you find one person that you just want all of those intimacies, the spiritual, the physical, the emotional, etc. Not that one person can't provide elements of all of those, but I'm learning the value of balance and just realizing that everyone's in different places in all these different areas, all these different buckets. Everyone's got buckets and pulleys going everywhere, and we just gotta have some level of reasonability, I guess, when we're interacting with those people in our lives. This is fun. Any other stories come to mind?
Yeah. So I was thinking a lot after the last episode of times that I have experienced more recently of like really precious moments of intimacy. And I found that there is a very real connection to intimate moments and me going through suffering or pain or heartache. And the first person that comes to mind is actually my ex-roommate, former roommate. It feels weird to say ex because we're still excellent friends, and that's still a really good thing. But he lived with me for
excellent.
Yes, X for excellent. So shout out to my excellent roommate, who's amazing, and he lived with me for almost 3 years, and is easily one of the most intimate friendships that I've had with another guy. And
3 years of living together, that's not nothing.
It's a big deal. And one of the pieces that comes to mind often is how many times where I was having a hard time or just going through difficult stuff, and I would wake him up pretty late at night and I would be sobbing, and I would say, hey, like, I'm not okay. And we would usually come out to the living room, and he would sit next to me and put his arms around me and just hold me while I sobbed and talked about whatever was feeling heavy. And I think of those moments not only being possible because we did have an intimate friendship, but how much those built upon what we already had, and just that how much intimacy is grown in the midst of suffering and hardship. And I think about this too a lot with my relationship with Jesus. And I even have got a post on Yob that talks about what I think it's entitled "What I Find at the End of Myself." And I talk about how in those moments of my deepest and darkest pain, of how those have so often been the times that I have felt the closest to Jesus, and how those have built upon the intimacy found in that connection. And so it feels counterintuitive that suffering would have that kind of impact on how we feel about our most intimate friendships. But it's a huge component of how we build that kind of closeness with other people.
Yeah, I was watching one of the Harry Potter movies with a friend the other night, and there were these moments.
Disclaimer: we do not support. We cannot endorse Harry Potter.
Not until they sponsor
but
us.
You are free. You are free to believe what you will.
We're all for it.
Right. Yeah.
Avada Kedavra.
But continue.
And there are these, and this isn't just Harry Potter, but like almost every movie, like it's, this happens a lot in like superhero movies too, where the characters are going through this devastating loss, and they're all like, and it draws them together, and they're all kind of, in the moment they're holding each other and crying, like you said, Jacob, and they have those moments, and I'm watching it kind of like, is it wrong that I kind of wish someone would die so that I could have this experience?
Yeah, there's something like extremely, I don't know, it's probably not healthy, but there's something that I find as a naturally melancholic person that like tends to see the world through a darker filter than most people. Maybe not most, probably most, I don't know. But seeing like the world as maybe a little sadder than most people, and anticipating those moments to come, because they're coming. Like Jesus said, you're gonna have trouble. The trouble's coming, so be ready for it. And kind of like anticipating that, because like you said, like Jacob, I've experienced so much spiritual intimacy, both with brothers who have supported me through some hard times, and then also just the direct connection with God himself. Like I just feel closer, like something about the tears, the literal tears, like it like opens some kind of a portal or some kind of a window in that relationship where it's like, man, like I'm really crying out to you, and I'm really vulnerable right now, and I'm really dependent on you, because like without without God, without Jesus, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Like nothing makes sense apart from him. And I'm really in those moments of brokenness, whatever the flavor of brokenness at the time is, like I realize in those moments of how dependent I am on him, and that spiritual connection is made all the more sweeter. Yeah. When there are brothers to rally around and behind as well. I guess to like really personalize this, like honestly, like if I had to like go back to that trophy case, I hate going back to this dang trophy case, but I think about those sacred moments and how actually both of you guys are in that trophy case as well. I was just having a really, really hard go about a year ago, and just absolutely broke down and lost it when we were all together. And it had been building and building. I felt it like building all day. It was kind of like this vomit that was there. Like I felt the vomit of my soul just rising and rising and rising. As we were at an event together and partaking in that. And it just reached a point like at the close of the day where it just had to come out. I felt it like I've never felt that much anxiety and just like tears that were building that I knew it had to come out. Just like literally like the perfect metaphor is vomiting. Like for those that do that, like I haven't vomited in years, but you can like feel it coming, you know, it's like this rush of something is inside and it's got to come out. And like, I remember like Ryan, you were conveniently right there, and I just absolutely lost it and barreled tears into your shoulder, and you held me, and I cried for a while.
And then I took a break to get you water, and Jacob stepped in.
You took a break, and Jacob stepped in and relieved that process. And yeah, and it was in my mind to like, I don't know, should I tell this story or not? Because I don't know, like I really valued just each of you being there in that space and in that time, as I was just really struggling on all fronts, spiritually and emotionally, relationally, and just having a really, really hard day, a really hard weekend, a really hard month. I mean, I could keep zooming out, a really hard year. Like it had been a culmination of a lot of things in that moment. And at the same time, like as broken as that moment was, it was just so restorative as well. And absolutely like, yeah, some of my most intimate moments shared with other human beings. And there just happened to be like 500 others filtering around us as it happened. It was extremely mortifying in some ways looking back, but also extremely healing and redemptive as well. So big shout out to you guys for
yeah, man,
for being there,
you know,
for sharing in that intimate moment with me, because that was a huge moment in my life.
I was thinking of that moment too, and I was also torn about like, oh, would Tom want me to bring this up, or like, you know, is this my story to tell exactly? But it is one of those things that I look back on, and that was a very intimate moment. I felt honored by that, and also, I wasn't thankful for like where you were at, but I was thankful for that connection, I guess. And I think that makes sense to you. And also this is kind of like another thing, like kind of in the back of my head, like I felt a lot of compassion for you in the moment, but also there was this thing going on in the back of my head where I was really envious of like, oh, well, Tom happened to have this breakdown when somebody was nearby, the lucky bastard. Like, and I never have anyone like this to hold me when I need to break down and cry. So I'm glad you had that experience, Tom.
If you ever need to conveniently break down while I'm around you, Ryan, my arms are open.
Well, I think
open for business.
Here's one big difference between you and me is that like I just get a lot of like, okay, things are all right from the people around me, especially close friends, and so I'm like really not that likely to have that breakdown moment when I'm around people, but it's really more like when I'm alone.
See, I can break down anytime, any place. There's no stopping me. Like if I need to cry, I'm gonna cry. And yeah, I'm glad I brought up the story because it was on my mind to bring up last time, and I'm glad I brought it up this time because, because I don't know, I just, as if it wasn't obvious in that moment, like I never got to just say, I don't think I ever articulated the words thank you to each of you for being there in that moment for me, because it was a really hard time. But yeah, it was such a blessing too. Like I remember going to bed that night just feeling really happy and smiling in this like weird paradoxical way. Like, wow, this life is hard and awful right now, but at least these two people are there for me. And that was just super meaningful.
1 year ago, my life hit the biggest question mark, the biggest cliff I'd ever faced in 3 decades. A community and a home, a brotherhood that I'd built, that I thought was strong, that would last forever, fell out from under me. I moved out, got my own studio apartment, and started living alone for the first time in years, for the sake of my spiritual health above all else. I went to bed crying some nights, most nights, if I could even fall asleep. I wondered if the last 2.5 years of my life had been for nothing, a waste of time for me and a waste of time for others. I seriously wondered, if my grandiose visions for brotherhood and belonging were foolish, an impossible dream. I wondered if I could ever love again, if I could ever trust again. And furthermore, if I was even worthy of being loved or being trusted. I struggled with my own self-worth and my own abilities to be in relationship, to be in healthy, strong, intimate friendship with another man. Because when the ground falls out from beneath you, how on earth do you stand again? In Donald Miller's book, Scary Close, he charts his journey with intimacy. And near the beginning of the book, he talks about his engagement that ultimately fell apart, a relationship that needed to end, and a conversation that he had with his good friend Bob. "Don," Bob said, "I think this is over." I had an office above a Thai restaurant on 23rd at the time. I leaned back in my chair with my feet on the windowsill. I thumbed through a pile of mail I hadn't looked at in weeks. He said it again. He said he thought the relationship was over, and I needed to acknowledge the fact. I knew he was right. It had been over for months. "Do you want me to get on a plane and help you tell her?" he asked sadly. "No," I said. "I can do it." So I did. It sounds trivial now. Millions of couples break off engagements, and nearly all of them are better off because of it. But when you're in it, when you say all those words and don't mean them a couple months later, you feel like a fool. You wonder if your words have power anymore. And what is a man if his words are weakened? Add to this the sadness, the confusing grief involved in hurting somebody, and the forced realization there's something in you so unhealthy and careless it could level a heart. My season of sadness lasted nearly a year, and once again it was Bob who helped me through it. One afternoon when I was back in my office trying to write, Bob called again. He asked how I was, and I told him I would be fine. He asked how I was healing, and I told him I was healing fine. Of course, none of that was true. I wasn't fine at all. I was numb. I kept a bottle of whiskey behind a Bible on the bookshelf, and when everybody went home, I'd have 3 drinks and listen to music as a way of trying to feel something. "You don't sound fine," Bob said. I'd have argued with him, but I was afraid he'd notice I was slurring my words. "You know what I've noticed about you, Don?" Bob said. "What's that, Bob?" "I've noticed you're good at relationships." I said nothing. I wasn't sure I understood him correctly. Then he said it again, right into the silence of the phone. "You're good at relationships, Don," he repeated. The truth is, I hadn't cried since I'd broken off the engagement. Like I said, I'd gone numb. But as he said those absurd words, something in me began to feel again, and all the pain of the season swelled up. I pulled the phone from my ear, dropped my head on the desk, and wept. And as I cried, Bob kept repeating, "Don, you're good at relationships. You're still good at them. You've always been good at them." For the next few months, there was a yawning chasm between Bob's affirmation and the way I felt about myself. But he kept calling, and every time he'd call, he'd say it again. You know, Don, you're terrific at relationships. Remember that time you encouraged me? Remember that kid you and I met in Uganda and how much he loved you? Remember that girl you dated years ago who still thinks of you as a brother? We can't let our failures define us, Don. You're good at relationships, and you're only getting better. Like a trial lawyer, he argued his case into my soul, week after week, until the chasm began to close. And so, my brothers, you who have succeeded relationally, and you who have failed, you who have gained friendships, and you who have lost, you who have grown and deepened in intimacy with others, and you who have withered and still yearn. Let us release the lie that we are incompetent or undeserving of love. Let us not isolate. Let us never isolate. And let us not be fearful of this intimacy we so desperately crave, the intimacy we've been beautifully wired to need. May the God who called companionship good call us deeper into relationship with one another, sharing burdens and pain, yes, but also sharing joy. And above all, doing as Christ himself has called us to do with each and every neighbor, to love him.
Well, that was excellent, guys. It is an honor to be back for Too Intimate, Too Soon, Too Much.
Too much. I like
more
that.
Intimacy. It's been great to be able to get to dive into a oftentimes hard to define topic and something that is very meaningful and very deep, and it is great to be able to talk about these things with both of you.
Yeah. Really enjoyed being able to, not that we don't ever dive to the deep end. I feel like that's kind of our brand on this show, but I don't know, the last couple episodes, it feels a little deeper maybe than in recent memory, stories that I can think of, podcasts that I can remember doing. So I feel honored to be included with y'all and tied together with y'all on these intimate episodes. Until the end of time, these episodes will have our names stamped on them. So whether you like it or not, that's the way it is.
Yeah, and this is like an evergreen topic that I feel like we'll always have more to say about.
This will be like the Fast and the Furious franchise. We're going to be doing Intimate Tokyo Drift, and we're going to be doing what are all the other ones.
Intimate
Hopefully,
7.
unlike those, they won't get worse and worse as
Right.
we go.
Right. Hopefully our intimacy stories will only grow and deepen and not grow more shallow.
And none of us will
Or
die
what
in a
have
car
you.
accident. Is that too soon?
Oh gosh. Too soon. Too much.
Too much. Too intimate.
If y'all have more intimate stories to share, please do. We love to hear them. We love to read them. We love to respond to them and dialogue with y'all. So yeah, whatever you heard in this episode, if you feel compelled to share, please share. You can go over to our podcast episode page at yourotherbrothers.com/podcast. Find the episode 48 post on more intimacy and tell us a story. We would love to, trade some of those and see what your glowy balls look like. I'm curious what our readers and listeners' glowy balls look like. Aren't you, Jacob?
Wow. Wow.
Aren't you, Ryan? Yeah. I want to see the glowy balls.
And this ends my podcasting career. Thank you, everyone.
No.
Have a good night.
Jacob, you're only just getting started. And as always, as this whole episode goes, thank you, Birdhouses, for sponsoring this podcast, for knitting it together, for sheltering us in the storm, for giving a sparrow a home, a literal home.
Yep. I'm also picturing that these birds are wearing tiny pair of thieves underwear. I think would be
That would be
perfect.
so cute.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Bird underwear.
Bird underwear.
That's a
Bird
niche
underwear.
sponsor.
Yeah.
adorable.
Yes. To our future sponsor, Pair of Thieves, we look forward to collaborating with you for many, many episodes to come. You basically have forced us to use your brother beat. You realizing
Well played,
By
Jacob.
constantly,
Well played.
that's all you got to do is
Sneaky.
constantly
Bring it
reference
up.
what you brought up.
I only
and
brought
then
it up
you got-
once. I didn't bring it up
Yeah.
any other times.
That's what Tom.
you could-
That's what Tom did
you
last
can
time,
cut it out at
keeping
the
talking
end.
about masturbation.
There was
Masturbation cleanse, yeah.
a perfectly long pause between him talking about birdhouses and me saying what kind of underwear that they're wearing. So that is an easy cut if that needs to happen. Don't you worry.
Anyway, y'all, this was a great conversation. Thanks for being on these episodes, Jacob. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. I guess that'll do it for this episode of Your Other Brothers podcast. For all your other brothers, this is Tom.
This is Jacob.
This is Ryan.
Reminding you that you are not alone. Even the sparrow finds a home. Or a birdhouse. Hee hee.
A bird
First time
home.
we've ever, first time we've ever tweaked the ending of this slogan.
Tweeted the ending.
See you next time, everybody.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Your Other Brothers podcast. Navigate more with us at yourotherbrothers.com and comment on this episode at yourotherbrothers.com/podcast. Subscribe to our show to never miss an episode. And if you enjoy what we do, consider rating and reviewing us on iTunes. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Your Other Bros. If you'd like to further support our storytelling effort, consider becoming a YOBBER. YOBBERS pledge monthly and receive perks like calls with authors and other supporters, access to a secret Facebook group, and additional podcast content. Visit patreon.com/yourotherbros for more information. Don't miss our monthly bonus podcast on Patreon, the YOBBELOG, featuring responses to previous podcasts, content not featured in public episodes, calls from listeners, and more. Ask us a question or tell us a story by leaving us a message at 706-389-8009. If you're new to the show, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at podcast@yourotherbrothers.com. You can also write us at Your Other Brothers, P.O. Box 843, Asheville, North Carolina 28802. Until we journey next time, we're glad you're with us.